The promise of peace died in silence. The medical vessel's pristine white hull shattered like glass under the barrage of plasma fire, its emergency beacons screaming into the void. Inside the ship's command center, Chief Medical Officer Sarah Chen watched in horror as red warning lights bathed the corridor in a bloody glow. 3,000 patients, 200 medical staff, and not a single weapon aboard. All personnel, initiate emergency protocols, she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Begin immediate evacuation procedures. Priority to critical care patients. The ship shuddered again as another volley struck. Through the view screen, Sarah caught glimpses of their attackers, sleek vessels with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No markings, no identification signals, just the cold precision of their attack pattern. Dr. Chen, her eye assistant's holographic form flickered beside her. Engineering reports multiple hull breaches. Life support is failing on decks 3 through 7. Sarah's fingers flew across the emergency console, rerouting power to the evacuation pods. The promise of peace had been humanity's flagship medical vessel, a symbol of their commitment to providing aid to any species in need. Now it would become something else entirely, a catalyst for war. In high orbit above Earth, Admiral James Torres received the distress signal. The aging veteran stood before the Strategic Command's main display, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical hologram. Around him, the command center hummed with controlled urgency as officers processed the incoming data. "Show me everything," Torres ordered, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years of service. The display shifted, revealing multiple angles of the attack. The mysterious vessels struck with surgical precision, targeting the Promise's engines and communication arrays first. This wasn't random violence. It was methodical, planned. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Hayes reported from her station, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the attacking vessels. They're using some kind of technology we've never encountered before." Torres's jaw tightened. Humanity had maintained peace in their sector of space for nearly 2 decades, earning respect through their medical and humanitarian missions. The promise of peace had treated patients from over 50 different species. This attack wasn't just an act of war. It was a calculated message. "Launch the quick response fleet," Torres commanded. "Priority 1 is evacuating survivors. But I want those attackers tracked. They don't get to skulk back to whatever rock they came from." As Earth's warships surged from their orbital docks, the promise of peace continued its death throes. Sarah Chen led her staff in a desperate race against time, moving patients to evacuation pods. The ship's corridors had become a maze of emergency lighting and acrid smoke. "Doctor," the AI reported, "hostile vessels are targeting the evacuation pods." Sarah's blood ran cold. "They're shooting at the pods, but they're clearly marked as medical transport." The realization hit her like a physical blow. Their attackers didn't care. This wasn't about military objectives or territorial disputes. This was something else entirely. In the command center, Torres watched as Earth's first responders engaged the enemy. The Quick Response Fleet, designed for rapid intervention, launched a covering screen of defensive fire. The mysterious attackers responded with impossible maneuvers, their ships moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. "Sir," Hayes called out, "we're picking up a transmission. It's different. The language pattern doesn't match any known species in our database." Torres leaned forward, studying the tactical display. "Record everything. Every energy signature, every movement pattern. Whoever they are, they just made the biggest mistake of their existence." The battle lasted less than 30 minutes. The attackers disappeared as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind the wreckage of humanity's greatest medical vessel and a changed political landscape. Of the 3,000 patients aboard, 2,800 were safely evacuated. The loss of 200 lives, including 50 human medical staff, would echo across the galaxy. In the aftermath, as rescue ships combed through the debris, Sarah Chen stood in the emergency command center of Earth's orbital station. Her medical whites were stained with soot and worse, but her posture remained unbowed. Admiral Torres joined her, both of them watching the recovery efforts through the station's observation window. They targeted the critical care ward first, Sarah said quietly. They knew exactly where our most vulnerable patients were located. This wasn't random, Admiral. They had our full schematics, our duty rosters, everything. Torres nodded slowly. That suggests infiltration, or someone sold us out. He turned to face her. Dr. Chen, I need everything you can tell me about the patients you were treating. Every species, every condition, every detail that might explain why someone would want to destroy a medical ship. Sarah met his gaze, her expression hardening. I'll give you what you need, Admiral. But first, I want your word on something. She gestured to the debris field. The promise of peace represented everything good about humanity. Our desire to heal, to help, to make the galaxy better. When you find who did this, remember what they tried to destroy. Remember what we stand for. Torres looked out at the glittering field of wreckage, each piece catching the light of Earth's sun. Oh, I'll remember, Doctor. And so will they. He straightened his uniform. Humanity just got a wake-up call. Now it's time to show the galaxy what happens when someone mistakes our compassion for weakness. As emergency boats continued their grim work, the wheels of Earth's military machine began to turn. In orbital shipyards and planetary bases, vessels were readied and troops mobilized. Humanity had spent generations proving they could be the galaxy's healers. Now they would remind everyone that they could be its warriors too. The promise of peace was gone, but its destruction would spark a fire that would burn across the stars. The hunt was about to begin. 1 week after the destruction of the promise of peace, humanity's response took shape in the cold void between stars. The EFS Retribution, Earth's newest stealth cruiser, sliced through space like a predator tracking its prey. On its bridge, Admiral Torres stood before a holographic display showing the last known trajectory of the attacking vessels. Multiple quantum wake signatures, reported Lieutenant Hayes, her fingers dancing across her sensor station. They tried to scatter their trail, but they couldn't hide everything. The energy pattern is unusual, almost like they're leaving breadcrumbs. Torres frowned. 20 years of space combat experience told him when something felt wrong. They're too good to be this sloppy. Either we're walking into a trap, or they want us to follow. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as a specialist consultant, studied the medical data scrolling across her tablet. After surviving the attack, she'd insisted on joining the hunt. Admiral, I've been analyzing the patient records from the promise. There's a pattern I can't explain. In the month before the attack, we saw a 300% increase in patients with radiation-related symptoms. That's not unusual for a medical ship, Torres replied, but his eyes narrowed. Unless someone was testing weapons, Sarah finished. Weapons that leave very specific traces that match the energy signatures we're tracking. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The promise of peace hadn't just been a target. It had been witnessing evidence of something larger, something its attackers couldn't allow to be discovered. The Retribution's tactical officer, Commander Jackson Wei, approached with a new analysis. Sir, we've mapped the attack patterns against known space lanes. These signatures, they're appearing in supposedly empty sectors. Sectors where we've had ships go missing over the past year. Torres's jaw tightened. How many ships? 17 civilian vessels, all reported lost to navigational errors or equipment failure, all in regions where these energy signatures are strongest. Sarah's medical training kicked in as she connected the dots. The radiation patients, they were all from those same sectors. They came to us because their local medical facilities couldn't explain their symptoms. Torres turned to his communications officer. Get me a secure line to Earth Command. Tell them we're not just dealing with terrorists. This is organized, systematic. Someone's been testing weapons in civilian space, using populated areas as their laboratory. The Retribution continued its hunt. following the quantum wake trail deeper into unexplored space. The ship's advanced stealth systems kept them hidden as they passed through several unknown sensor nets, technology that shouldn't have existed in these empty sectors. 3 days later, they found their first solid lead, a small research station hidden in the orbit of a rogue planet. Its design was unlike anything in Earth's database, but its energy signature matched the attacking vessels perfectly. Life signs, Torres asked as they maintained their stealth approach. Minimal, Hayes reported, but the station's putting out enough power to run a small city. Most of it's going to some kind of shielded central chamber. Sarah studied the station's layout. Those aren't medical facilities. The radiation patterns, the power distribution, it's all wrong. This is a weapons testing facility. Torres made his decision. Prep a stealth insertion team. Dr. Chen, you're with them. Your medical knowledge might help us understand what we're dealing with. Commander Wei, have the ship ready to drop stealth and provide fire support if things go south. The insertion was textbook perfect. Earth's special operations teams had trained for years to board alien vessels, and their expertise showed. Within minutes, they had secured the station's outer ring without raising any alarms. Sarah moved with the team, her medical scanner revealing more disturbing details with every step. The radiation patterns here, they're similar to what we saw in our patients, but magnified. Whatever they're testing, it's getting stronger. In the central chamber, they found their answers. Banks of quantum computers surrounded a central testing area. Holographic displays showed test results, star charts, and what appeared to be targeting data. But it was the medical logs that made Sarah's blood run cold. They're not just testing weapons, she whispered, reading through the data. They're testing them on populated worlds, seeing how different species react to exposure. The promise of peace, we were getting too close to figuring it out. Our patients were leading us right to them. Before Torres could respond, alarms blared through the station. On the main display, multiple ships dropped out of quantum space, vessels matching those that had attacked the promise of peace. All teams, fall back to extraction points, Torres ordered. Download everything you can. Earth needs to know what we found. As the team retreated to their ship, Sarah copied as much data as she could. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a conspiracy larger than anyone had imagined. The attack on the promise of peace hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been part of a calculated plan to prevent humanity from discovering a massive weapons development program. Back aboard the Retribution, Torres watched as the mysterious ships surrounded the research station. Instead of pursuing, they began destroying the facility, eliminating evidence of their activities. They're burning their own research, Sarah observed. They'd rather lose everything than let us find it. Torres nodded grimly. But they're too late. We have proof now. Proof of weapons testing. Proof of civilian casualties. Proof of an organized conspiracy operating in sovereign space. He turned to his command crew. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. It's time the rest of humanity learned what we're really dealing with. As the Retribution disappeared into quantum space, Sarah reviewed the stolen data. The radiation signatures, the patient symptoms, the weapons tests, it all pointed to something unprecedented. Someone wasn't just developing new weapons, they were preparing for a war they didn't want humanity to know about until it was too late. The shadows in the void had revealed their first secrets, but the true scale of the conspiracy remained hidden. For now, humanity had proof of their enemy's existence. The next step would be finding out why they had chosen this moment to strike, and who they really were. The data retrieved from the research station painted a disturbing picture. In Earth's Strategic Command Center, Admiral Torres and Dr. Chen stood before the assembled Joint Chiefs as holographic displays showed the extent of the conspiracy. The room's atmosphere was heavy with tension as the implications became clear. The energy signatures we detected aren't just weapons, Sarah explained, manipulating the holographic display. They're testing prototypes designed to target specific genetic markers. These weapons can be programmed to affect certain species while leaving others unharmed. Admiral Torres stepped forward. We've identified at least 7 different species involved in this coalition. All of them share one common trait. They're from worlds that have recently lost territory or influence to expanding human colonies. The Joint Chiefs murmured among themselves as Torres continued. The attack on the promise of peace wasn't just about silencing our medical personnel. It was a message. They're telling us to stop expanding, to stay within our current borders. General Rivera, her silver hair reflecting the blue glow of the holograms, spoke up. Do we have any indication of their full military capability? Sarah brought up new data streams. The radiation signatures suggest they've been developing these weapons for at least 3 years. But there's something else. She highlighted a series of genetic sequences. The weapons they're testing. They're specifically designed to be most effective against human physiology. The room fell silent. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about territory. It was about eliminating humanity's ability to expand further into space. Hours later, aboard the Retribution, Sarah worked late into the night shift, analyzing patient records from other human medical facilities. The ship had become Earth's mobile command center for the investigation, its advanced systems perfect for processing the massive amount of data they'd recovered. Lieutenant Hayes entered the medical lab, carrying fresh intelligence reports. Doctor, we've got something. Remember those civilian ships that went missing? We found a pattern in their cargo manifests. Sarah looked up from her work. What kind of pattern? They were all carrying medical supplies. But here's the weird part. The manifests were altered after the ships disappeared. Someone tried to hide what they were really transporting. Sarah's eyes widened as she cross-referenced the data. They weren't just medical supplies. Those ships were carrying genetic samples from human colonies. The coalition wasn't just studying our physiology. They were collecting it. The revelation sparked a flurry of activity. Admiral Torres ordered a full review of all shipping manifests from the past 3 years. The pattern became clear. The coalition had been systematically gathering data on human genetic diversity, studying how different colonial populations had adapted to their new worlds. But it was a seemingly unrelated piece of intelligence that finally revealed the full scope of their enemies' plans. A routine patrol near the Arcturus colony picked up a damaged data core floating in debris from a recent meteorite impact. The core contained diplomatic communications from one of the coalition species. They're afraid of us, Torres realized as he read the translated messages. Not of our weapons or our ships. They're afraid of how quickly we adapt. Sarah nodded, the pieces falling into place. The promise of peace proved it. In just 50 years, we've learned to treat virtually every known species. We've adapted our medical technology to work with alien physiologies that evolved on completely different worlds. The coalition sees that adaptability as a threat. The diplomatic messages revealed a deeper truth. The coalition species had evolved very slowly, taking thousands of years to make the same biological adaptations that humans managed in a few generations. Humanity's rapid colonization of hostile worlds, their quick mastery of alien medical techniques, and their unprecedented rate of technological advancement had terrified the more conservative species. These weapons they're developing, Sarah continued, they're not just meant to stop our expansion. They're trying to force our evolution into a more predictable pattern. They want to slow us down, make us more like them. Torres studied the tactical displays showing coalition movements throughout known space. They'd been watching us since we first reached the stars. Everything. The missing ships, the weapons tests, the attack on the promise. It's all been building to something bigger. A priority alert flashed across the main screen. New intelligence from Earth's deep space listening posts had detected massive fleet movements in coalition space. Ships were gathering, weapons were being distributed, and command structures were being established. They're not waiting anymore, Torres said grimly. The attack on the promise of peace was just the beginning. They're ready to launch their main offensive. Sarah looked at the medical data one last time, understanding flowing through her. They want to strike before we adapt further, before we spread to more worlds. They think this is their last chance to contain humanity's potential. Torres straightened his uniform, his decision made. Well then, Doctor, I suggest we show them exactly why humanity's adaptability is something to be respected, not feared. He turned to his communications officer. Send word to all Earth forces. Operation Shadow Walker is now in effect. It's time to show our enemies what happens when you try to cage humanity. As alerts sounded throughout Earth's territory, the true battle was about to begin. The Coalition had spent years preparing to contain humanity's expansion. Now they would learn that trying to restrict human potential was like trying to hold back the tide. Impossible, and ultimately destructive to anyone who tried. Operation Shadow Walker was humanity's answer to the Coalition's careful plans. While their enemies had spent years developing weapons to contain human expansion, humanity demonstrated exactly why they were so feared, by adapting faster than anyone thought possible. The retribution hung in the void, its stealth systems masking it from the Coalition fleet gathering at their primary forward base. On the bridge, Admiral Torres watched the enemy ships arrive, each one carrying weapons designed to target human genetics. Status on the infiltration team, Torres asked, his voice low and controlled. Lieutenant Hayes monitored the encrypted communications. Dr. Chen's team is in position. They've successfully modified their biosignatures using the Coalition's own research against them. The plan was audacious, born from humanity's unique talent for turning an enemy's strength into a weakness. Sarah had discovered that the Coalition's obsession with studying human genetics had given them the key to defeating their own weapons. In the maintenance tunnels beneath the Coalition's base, Sarah led a team of Earth's best scientists and special operations personnel. Their bodies had been temporarily modified using the Coalition's own genetic research, making them appear as members of various Coalition species to automated scanners. Remember, Sarah whispered to her team, we have 48 minutes before the modifications begin to break down. We need to reach the central database and upload the virus before then. The virus wasn't a traditional computer program. It was a modified version of the Coalition's own genetic targeting system, designed to create confusion in their carefully crafted weapons. If it worked, it would cause their bioweapons to recognize their own forces as human. Commander Wei's voice came through their secure comms. Doctor, we're detecting increased activity in the base. They're preparing for something big. Sarah's team moved through the facility, their borrowed genetic signatures allowing them to pass security checkpoints undetected. The Coalition's own arrogance, their belief that their genetic scanning technology was foolproof, had created a vulnerability. In the base's central control room, the Coalition leadership gathered. 7 species, united by their fear of human potential, prepared to launch their preemptive strike. Their fleet was assembled, their weapons were primed, and they believed humanity was still scrambling to understand what was happening. Sarah's team reached the central database core. As they began uploading the modified targeting sequences, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. We've been made, one of the Spec Ops soldiers reported, taking up a defensive position. Sarah's fingers flew across the alien console. The upload is at 60%. We need 5 more minutes. Outside the base, the Coalition fleet began to move. Admiral Torres watched as enemy ships formed up into attack formations. Sir, Hayes reported, they're preparing to jump to Earth coordinates. Torres allowed himself a grim smile. Right on schedule. Signal the fleet. Operation Shadow Walker Phase 2 is a go. Throughout Coalition space, hundreds of quantum ruptures appeared simultaneously. Earth's ships, hidden for days using modified versions of the Coalition's own stealth technology, emerged in perfect attack position. Inside the base, Sarah's team held their position as Coalition security forces converged on their location. The modified genetic signatures were beginning to fade, and internal sensors were starting to identify them as human. Upload at 80%, Sarah reported. We just need a little more time. A security team burst through the door, weapons raised. The Earth Special Forces engaged them with precisely targeted shots, using stunning weapons rather than lethal force. Even now, humanity would show the difference between their philosophies. Doctor, Tortoise's voice came through the comm. The Coalition fleet is spinning up their weapons. Whatever you're going to do it now. Sarah watched the upload counter. 90%. 95. The Coalition forces were pressing their attack, and her team's defensive position was weakening. Upload complete, she announced, initiating activation sequence. Throughout Coalition space, their carefully designed bioweapons began to receive new targeting data. The genetic markers they were programmed to attack suddenly appeared to match their own forces rather than humans. The Coalition fleet, moments away from launching their attack, received desperate warnings from their weapon control systems. Their own ships were being identified as human targets. "This is Admiral Torres to all Earth forces." Torres's voice rang through the command channel. The Coalition wanted to see humanity's potential. Show them. Disable their ships, but minimize casualties. Let's show them the difference between containing a threat and containing potential. Earth's fleet engaged, their ships moving with precision and coordination that stunned the Coalition forces. Humanity had not only adapted to counter their weapons, they had evolved their tactics, their technology, and their strategy faster than the Coalition had believed possible. In the base's control room, Sarah's team secured their position as confusion spread through the Coalition forces. Their own security systems were now identifying them as potential threats, while recognizing the human intruders as friendly forces. A rather elegant solution, don't you think? Sarah asked one of the captured Coalition leaders. You spent years studying how we adapt, but you never considered that we might adapt to use your own research against you. The Coalition's carefully planned attack had been transformed into chaos. Their weapons were useless, their security systems were compromised, and Earth's fleet had them surrounded. Years of preparation and planning had been undone in hours by the very adaptability they had feared. Admiral Torres opened a channel to the Coalition command. Your weapons have been neutralized. Your fleet is surrounded. Now shall we discuss the true meaning of evolution? Because humanity is prepared to show you that adaptation doesn't have to mean conflict. We can help you evolve too, if you're willing to learn. In the aftermath of Operation Shadow Walker, humanity faced a choice. The Coalition's fleet was disabled, their weapons neutralized, and their leadership captured. Traditional military doctrine would call for a decisive strike, while their enemies were vulnerable. Instead, humanity chose to demonstrate why they were truly different. 3 days after the failed Coalition attack, Admiral Torres stood in the grand chamber of Earth's diplomatic center. The room's vast windows revealed the glittering expanse of Earth's orbital shipyards, where vessels of all species were now gathering for an unprecedented summit. The Coalition spent years studying how quickly humans adapt. Dr. Sarah Chen addressed the assembled representatives. But they missed something crucial about our evolution. She gestured to the medical data displayed on the chamber's holographic screens. We don't just adapt our bodies or our technology. We adapt our understanding. The Coalition leaders, no longer prisoners but guests, watched as Sarah displayed their own research alongside humanity's response. Where they had sought to develop weapons, humanity had developed defenses that could protect all species. Where they had tried to limit expansion, humanity offered ways to make previously uninhabitable worlds accessible to everyone. Your fear of our potential led you to see us as a threat, Torres continued. But potential isn't just about physical adaptation or technological advancement. It's about the capacity to grow beyond our limitations, all of us together. In orbit, the promise of Peace-I was nearing completion. Larger than its predecessor, the new medical ship incorporated both human and Coalition medical technology. It would serve as a symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation rather than conflict. One of the Coalition leaders, a Nexari elder whose species had been among the most fearful of human expansion, stepped forward. We spent generations evolving so slowly that rapid change terrified us. We saw your ability to adapt quickly as a threat to the natural order. The natural order is change itself, Sarah replied. But change doesn't have to mean losing what you are. It can mean becoming more than you were. She brought up new medical data, showing how coalition species could benefit from controlled genetic adaptation without losing their essential characteristics. Torres addressed the gathered representatives. You tried to contain humanity because you feared where our evolution might lead. Now we offer you the chance to evolve with us. Not through weapons or warfare, but through cooperation and mutual growth. The proposal humanity put forward was unprecedented. Instead of demanding reparations or territory, Earth offered to share their expertise in adaptation. The Coalition's research into genetic markers, originally intended for weapons, would be repurposed to help all species better survive on new worlds. The promise of peace wasn't just a hospital ship, Sarah explained. It was a promise to use our knowledge to help others. You tried to break that promise, but instead, you've given us the opportunity to make it stronger. In the days that followed, the Coalition's weapon facilities were converted into medical research centers. Their massive fleet, built for war, was retrofitted for exploration and colonization. The very adaptability they had feared became the key to a new era of cooperation. 6 months after the failed attack, the promise of peace II embarked on its maiden voyage. Its crew was mixed, humans working alongside the very species that had once sought to contain them. Sarah Chen, now serving as its chief medical officer, stood on the observation deck watching Earth recede into the distance. Admiral Torres's hologram appeared beside her. The Coalition's latest reports show successful genetic treatments on 3 of their worlds. Their scientists are already talking about possibilities they never dared to consider before. Sarah nodded, studying the medical data on her tablet. They're adapting faster than even we expected. It turns out that once you stop fearing change, you can embrace it. Fear of change, Torres mused. It's a universal constant. But so does the potential to overcome that fear. As the promise of peace II prepared for its first quantum jump, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. The Coalition had attacked a hospital ship, thinking they could contain humanity's potential. Instead, they had unleashed it in ways they never imagined, not as a force for destruction, but as a catalyst for growth. Admiral, she said, looking at the stars ahead, do you think they understand now what human potential really means? Torres smiled. They're beginning to. Every time we help one of their worlds, every time we solve a problem they thought was unsolvable, they understand a little more. Human potential isn't about conquering or controlling. It's about lifting everyone up together. The promise of peace II disappeared into quantum space, carrying its message of hope and growth to the stars. Behind it, humanity's influence spread not through force of arms, but through the force of inspiration. They had shown the galaxy that the most powerful adaptation wasn't in weapons or technology, but in the ability to turn enemies into allies and fear into hope. In the end, the Coalition had been right about one thing. Humanity's potential was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. But they had been wrong about what that potential would mean. Instead of a force to be contained, it became a light that showed the way forward, illuminating a path that all species could walk together. The stars beckoned, and humanity answered not with conquest, but with compassion. Not with dominance, but with discovery. The promise of peace had been destroyed, but its promise lived on, stronger than ever, written in the very DNA of a changing galaxy.